As a Westerner who gets most of his information in English, I've noticed that China is almost always framed one way, as a constant threat, a dictatorship seeking global domination, with Xi and the party portrayed as power-hungry villains who don't care about their own people. But when you look at the history, not just the last few decades of headlines, a different picture emerges. China isn't some new evil empire scheming to take over the world. It's an old civilization that spent most of its existence as the center of the known world. And when it lost that position in the 19th and 20th century, it suffered deeply. In this video, my second one about China, I'll show you why today's China isn't driven by conquest or malice. Instead, it's applying long-term thinking to dominate key industries and shape a more orderly world, even as others chase short-term chaos. If you're tired of the same fear-driven propaganda, stick around. Let's reason through it together. To understand modern China, we have to start with one of the biggest myths, that a powerful China is inherently aggressive and expansionist. Let's look at the record since the founding of the People's Republic in 1949. In over 75 years, China has started only one major war, the brief 1979 conflict with Vietnam. That war lasted about a month, from February 17 to March 16, 1979. China launched an invasion across the border, involving hundreds of thousands of troops, in response to Vietnam's invasion of Cambodia. The PLA advanced, declared its objectives met, and withdrew unilaterally. Casualties were heavy on both sides, estimates range from 20,000 to 60,000 total, but it was limited in scope, not aimed at permanent occupation or regime change. Since then, China did not start a single war. There have been border clashes, for example with India in 1962 and 1969 skirmishes with the Soviet Union along the Ussuri River, but these were defensive reactions to perceived threats, not unprovoked invasions. Naval incidents in the South China Sea like the 1988 clash were small-scale and tied to disputed claims, not conquest of sovereign territory. Compare that to other major powers in the same period. The United States has been involved in dozens of military interventions and wars, from Korea and Vietnam to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. Even smaller powers have often launched or joined major conflicts. But going deeper, for most of its 3,000 plus years, a strong China didn't expand through endless conquest. It dominated through the power of its culture and economy. Neighbors paid tribute not because they were conquered by armies, but because aligning with the Middle Kingdom brought prosperity, technology, and stability. Even when others conquered China, the Mongols in the 13th century, the Manchus in the 17th, they quickly adopted Chinese ways. The civilization absorbed and Sinicized its conquerors, not the other way around. Today's China seems to follow a similar logic. It prefers influence through infrastructure, trade, and technological innovation over boots-on-the-ground occupations. So, if the aggression narrative doesn't fully explain things, what does? If China has shown that it prefers soft power influence rather than endless war, why does the China threat narrative dominate the Western media? The answer lies less in ideology or morality and more in the cold logic of geopolitics. When one country becomes wealthy and powerful enough to challenge the dominant player almost always reacts with suspicion and rivalry. This isn't unique to the US and China, it is a recurring pattern of history. Right now, in 2026, China already has the world's largest economy when measured by purchasing power parity. According to the latest IMF projections from late 2025, China's GDP stands at over $40 trillion, comfortably ahead of the United States' $30 trillion. In nominal dollars, the raw exchange rate figure often used for comparisons, the US still leads, but that gap is narrowing as China grows. Why does this matter so much? China has over 4 times the population of the US. When a nation that large achieves prosperity, when its people reach middle income levels and its industries grow, its overall economic weight becomes enormous. That translates directly into military, technological, and diplomatic power. A truly wealthy China isn't just a big economy, it's potentially the central power in the world, echoing the Middle Kingdom role it held for most of its history. For the United States, which has been the sole superpower since the end of the Cold War, this shift feels existential. It does not want to share the stage, let alone risk being overtaken. So the response is predictable: build coalitions, impose restrictions on technology and trade, and frame the rising power as a threat to freedom, security, or the rules-based order. A good example is Washington's courtship of India. The US has poured resources into the Quad partnership, US, India, Japan, and Australia, explicitly positioning India as a counterweight to China in the Indo-Pacific. This makes strategic sense in the current rivalry, but superpowers care only about their own dominance. If India continues its rapid growth and one day approaches similar scale, the dynamics will change. The same containment strategy might turn towards New Delhi if it becomes too powerful. This doesn't mean every concern about China is fabricated. Real frictions exist, like maritime disputes or intellectual property theft, but the intensity of the threat framing, the way it's often presented as existential danger, stems more from this power shift than from actual Chinese aggression. As any reasonable person can see, China cannot be blamed for wanting prosperity. No country should apologize for lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty or building powerful industries. To understand just how far and how fast this shift has happened, let's look at the fields China now dominates, often fields it was barely relevant just 10 to 20 years ago. To really grasp what waking up looks like in practice, we need to look at the fields where China has gone from near irrelevance to dominance, often in just 10 to 20 years. This isn't gradual catch-up, it's explosive, state-guided acceleration through massive investments. First, electric vehicles and batteries. In the early 2010s, China was a minor player, producing mostly low-end cars with global EV market share under 5%. Today, Chinese firms produce nearly 2/3 of the world's EVs and over 68% of global EV batteries. CATL alone holds around 38% of the battery installation market, with BYD surpassing Tesla in global EV sales in recent years. China controls roughly 70% of lithium-ion battery manufacturing capacity worldwide. Next, solar panels and renewables. 20 years ago, China was catching up on basic manufacturing. Europe, Japan, and the US dominated high-quality solar tech. Now, China accounts for over 80% of global solar module production, 80 to 85% of the entire supply chain, and roughly 60% of wind and battery-related clean energy manufacturing. Chinese exports have flooded the world, driving costs down dramatically. Solar module prices dropped over 80% in the last decade. Then there's high-speed rail. In 2005, China had 0 operational high-speed lines. It started borrowing and adapting foreign tech. By late 2025, the network exceeds 50,000 kilometers, more than the rest of the world combined. China now exports this tech via Belt and Road projects, turning infrastructure into soft power. In artificial intelligence, the story is similar but nuanced. China files far more AI patents than anyone, over 188,000 in recent years, multiple times the US total. Tsinghua University alone outpaces entire US Ivy League universities in AI patents. China excels in scale, applications, and industrial integration, leading in AI researchers, robotics deployments, and real-world adoption. Add in rare earths and critical minerals. China controls 60 to 90% of refining for elements like lithium, cobalt, and graphite. Drones and robotics, and emerging areas like quantum communication, the pattern repeats. Start low, invest massively, leverage the world's largest domestic market and talent pool, subsidize and scale up. Fields where China was completely irrelevant or trailing badly 10 to 20 years ago are now ones where it sets global standards, prices, and supply chains. This mirrors historical China. When centralized and prosperous, it dominated through organization and innovation, now updated for the 21st century with state-guided capitalism. Since the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991, the world has been unipolar. The United States has been the only superpower with unmatched military, economic, and diplomatic power. No country came even close. This freedom sometimes led to decisions that many around the world saw as irresponsible. Interventions in Iraq, Libya, and others did not take into account the opinions of other countries. often prioritizing US interests and destroying the regional stability. Without a counterweight, there was little to prevent the US from doing whatever it wanted. In recent years, it got even worse. Trump's second term has amplified this pattern. In 2025 and 2026, we've seen unilateral tariffs, including on allies like Canada, Mexico, or the EU, and threats tied to issues like Greenland or trade deficits. These moves disrupted global supply chains, spiked costs for people everywhere, and pushed countries to seek alternative trading partners. Military actions like strikes on Iran will again destabilize the entire Middle East and maybe even the entire world. A multipolar world, with China as a major pole, changes this dynamic. It's not about replacing US dominance with Chinese dominance, it's about balance. A strong China offers a genuine counterweight, forcing to think twice before making a controversial move. For smaller and middle powers, this is important. Today, many feel pressured to align fully with Washington or face consequences. With China providing infrastructure, trade, and tech without the same political strings, countries gain real choices. They can diversify partnerships, negotiate better terms, and reduce the risk of being bullied by any single power. In short, multipolarity promotes fairness. It encourages win-win deals over zero-sum dominance. Of course, this isn't utopia. China has its own flaws, but a world where no one hegemon calls every shot, it's likely safer and better for everyone. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed my video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next video.